screen. So you should see in front of you the science and practice of mindfulness and compassion. So let's do this together. So to begin with, I invite all of us, self included, to fully arrive. And what I mean by that is our minds are usually busy and thinking and lots of things going on. So right now, I invite us, you can keep your eyes open, to fully arrive. Just relax your shoulders. Relax the muscles in your face. Relax your neck. And actually notice your body breathing. Notice how the torso expands and contracts as you breathe in and breathe out. And see if you can really arrive. Align your body and your mind here. Give yourself the chance to become present here. To take a pause. Good. So, mindfulness and compassion. So compassion, here are a bunch of different words, ideas, concepts that are related to the core notion of compassion. And if you look at these, I'm sure that many of these would come across your mind if I asked you, what is compassion, right? Self-empathy, feeling, connecting, presence, communication, heart, soul, here, requesting. So compassion is a very complex, in one way it's very complex, in another way it's very simple. And we're going to explore that together a little bit. So here, when I challenged myself, literally, this was just a few weeks ago, I said, what does compassion consist of? And I came up with this idea: insight into context, causes, conditions that give rise to suffering, to pain, and to confusion. Insight, like a deep understanding. Then C, courage, a courage to approach as opposed to avoid. One of the main things that we humans do is we avoid difficult situations, and that's understandable. But compassion is just the opposite. It's like a firefighter, right, who has the courage to go into the forest, into the fire, as opposed to running away in the opposite direction. A lot more to be said about this type of courage. And then understanding how to take a motivated, skillful action in the world. So navigating the complexities with understanding. So this is easy. It's I, see, you. And I was playing on those because I, see, you, very easy to remember. And I was also thinking in a medical setting, the intensive care unit. And this is kind of a pun, that to become a compassionate warrior, a caring human being, is to become somebody who can see others and who cares about others. So there's just one model. It's not the only model, but I wanted to share this with you. Why compassion? Like, we, as scientists, we should always say, so what? Why? Why do we even care about this? I mean, let's be really honest, right? So why? So here's one model of why. And this may be obvious to many of you. There's suffering, individual suffering, pain, angst, insecurity, self-doubt. There's lots of interpersonal problems, like we were just talking about, at home with your partners or at work, misunderstandings. There's the travesty of war, killing. We only need to look at Afghanistan and probably dozens of other areas right this moment on the planet that are suffering from bombs, fighting, war, and the results of that on many other innocent people. And then there's climate change, the fact that human behavior is literally harming the planet. And this will be more and more in our face over the years to come. So there are many different kinds of sources of problems, suffering. It's a VUCA world. This is a model. VUCA means volatile. Things are volatile and changing and exploding. We see that all the time. Things are uncertain. it's very hard to predict what's going to happen, even in the near future. This uncertainty is often difficult to hold. Things are complex, and more complex as we have more advanced digital worlds that we try to navigate, let alone our own minds are complex. And then things are ambiguous. It's not always clear, even with the greatest insight, what should I be doing? Where should I put my energy? How can I cultivate my own mind and inner qualities? So that's the VUCA world. And what I would suggest here is that this is a quote I like, which is that the world is becoming more turbulent, faster than most organizations are becoming resilient. So this is an incredible challenge for organizations to adapt and shift. And then I like this picture because it reminds me that just being a human being by itself is difficult, challenging. So in the face of this, what can we do? So what I would like for each of us to do is right now to set an intention, a motivation. Why am I here at this particular seminar? Or what's my intention for today? Is there a way that I can shift my mind and actually place a value on something? Whether it's to take care of yourself, to eat well, exercise, whether it's to do something that might be helpful to another person, check in on a friend or a family member, or even a pet. It might be an intention to notice the beauty of nature. I'm looking at some beautiful trees outside my window right this moment, to actually take the time to slow down. So just for a moment, set an intention for today. And it can be very brief. And then what I can share is that there is some empirical research on when a person clarifies their values and sets an intention, it can literally influence their psychophysiology, heart rate, skin conductance, even hormones like cortisol, stress hormones. So setting an intention that's in alignment with my values actually impacts our biology, this research laboratory, this mind body. So I encourage us to play with that, to experiment with that. So here, this is simply a reminder of the despair, anger, confusion, giving up, hopelessness, feeling frozen, avoidance that all of us feel. And it's very important for us to understand what are my own inner adverse emotions, challenging emotions, tendencies. These are completely understandable. And even in the context of developing a meditation practice or mindfulness, compassion, and other qualities, it's very easy to think, this is too much. I can't do this. I suck at this. I'm just going to give up. And the question is, in the face of that, what can we do? Well, if most of you, I hope, are familiar with Star Wars, this is Luke Skywalker. And essentially, one of the things that we like to play with is, what are some ideas? Like, what does it mean to become a master of your mind, of your emotions, become a Jedi master? Well, from a neuroscience perspective, this is a very reduced model, but this is a model that many of us have used in our research, neuroscience research, that there are different emotions, there are parts of the brain that detect emotions within milliseconds, even before conscious awareness, and they send a bottom-up signal to the blue bubble and to bring in cognitive regulation, attention regulation, that helps to amplify or increase certain emotions, decrease others, and exerts a top-down influence. And in humans like us, we also have many brain regions that work together to engage language. What's the inner self-talk? How do I describe things to myself? And we'll do some practices on that in a moment. And then we have self-referential processing brain regions that help us have either adaptive or maladaptive views, plural, views of self. And those change over time. There are many other modules and psychological abilities that are instantiated in the brain. But with neuroscientific tools and experimental tasks, we can begin to see how these different systems interact to make us human, to make us vulnerable, to make us resilient to all of the adversity and challenges that we were just talking about. So we like to say that to become a Jedi master of one's own mind, brain, body. What to do? How do we do this? Well, the motivation, going back to motivation and intention, is really to be honest and say there's a lot of angst, there's lots of insecurity, loneliness, self-doubt. I'm stating the obvious. One of my clinical supervisors always said, state the obvious. But the question is, how do we get from that to the other side, which is a mind that feels creative, illuminated, open, innovative? And that's going to look different for each of us. There's no one simple answer. But one thing that we know from neuroscience is this notion of neuroplasticity. So probably like 40 years ago, different researchers began to literally see that the neurons, the neural connections, even the anatomical and functional connections in our brain are plastic, organic, changing with behaviors. So what we do every day literally is sculpting the strength of connectivity and the function across these different brain regions. So in one way, we can think that we are the architects of our own brain and mind. In one way, that's a huge responsibility. In another way, it's a great freedom because it's exciting. If I exercise, if I eat well, if I have loving, caring relationships, I literally am nourishing different brain connections. So let's see, how do we do this? So inner transformation, this is just a very little bubble. I love this because there's this glue. I don't know if you have it in Singapore, but United States, it's called crazy glue. So we like to talk about the sticky mind, the mind that sticks onto lots of negative beliefs about myself, about the world. This is like crazy glue. But on the other side, we have WD-40, which is a team of chemists, their 40th attempt to make this chemical agent that you can spray into locks that have lots of dirt and grit and hair, and you spray it, and it loosens up the dirt just enough so that the key can go in and unlock. So I would suggest that different skills, be they from therapy or meditation, are like the WD-40. They loosen up overlearned patterns in the brain and the mind, and they loosen them up just enough that I might take a different perspective, that I might see the world and myself from a slightly different view that helps me be more content and skillful. So going from crazy glue to WD-40. So this is the slide that is important because really this is the essence. So pay attention. Going from negative beliefs, and we all have a core set of about 20 or 30 negative self-beliefs that we spin in. And how do we get to the other side, to the right side, which is psychological flexibility, this kind of freedom of mind. So in this context, we're talking about contemplation, different kinds of meditations or practices for training different skills in the mind. We know that the alchemy is that they loosen up overlearned maladaptive patterns just enough so that they can have an impact on changing the communication across these different brain systems, these brain networks that make up each moment of our existence. Emotions, emotion regulation, views of self, etc. So this is, and then that the impact is that this hopefully then has an influence on how our interpersonal relationships with other people, family, friends, strangers, pets, loved ones. And hopefully, actually necessarily, that it has an impact on how we treat the whole planet, because we are ultimately interconnected. The word meditation, there's a lot of confusion about that, what that actually refers to, but it's in Sanskrit, bhavna, literally comes from agriculture. planting seeds in the field to grow things. So likewise, from a contemplative perspective, the word meditation, or gom in Tibetan, is a set of tools and techniques to cultivate specific qualities, positive qualities in the mind, to gain familiarity, even intimacy and insight into the mental processes that make up one's self. So it's really technology, inner technology for inner transformation. In the same way that there's a developmental trajectory from, say, preschool, elementary school, secondary school, maybe university, graduate school, there's also where we develop many different cognitive abilities and content as well. Likewise, for contemplative training, there's a whole trajectory. So I will take some questions a little bit later. I just want to get through this. And I want to make it clear, because sometimes people don't appreciate this. There's a whole set of practices. So in fact, in the sutras, they talk about 108,000 different practices, because people have a lot of individual differences. So there are many different practices for developing, say, the muscle and the strength of concentration, focused attention, open monitoring, using images, sounds. There are many different practices, but this develops the capacity to place attention, to stabilize it, and to make it a solid ground or base for doing more advanced meditation training. There's a whole other set of practices that here I'd like to call analytic, conceptual, logical reasoning, where you use logic, language, thinking to analyze many different aspects, be it about compassion or empathy, loving kindness, impermanence, death. And this is using intellectual skills to try to pierce into an understanding of reality. And this becomes the base for the next set of practices, which I would suggest is the real medicine, which is emptiness, or sometimes called non-duality or interconnectedness. In Sanskrit, it's called shunyata. But all of this refers to going from conceptual to non-conceptual, dissolving a distorted or mistaken view of the nature of self. This understanding is the basis for what we call ultimate compassion, not relative compassion or conventional, but really a stable compassion. So this is a developmental trajectory of training in the mind. And usually you need to do this with others and with teachers and guides. What you see here is the Japanese kanji characters. It's 2 characters that make up the word that in English, and I'm not sure it's the best translation, to be honest, mindfulness. Some Buddhist scholars have questioned if that's the best way to do it. But this character, if you look at the top, it refers to now, the present moment. The character in the bottom refers to the heart, the mind. And this is, and I think that's informative for what is mindfulness practice referring to? Being in the present moment with an open heart and a curious mind. In fact, John Kabat-Zinn, who's a PhD molecular biologist from MIT, who's a professor at University of Massachusetts Medical Center, who started the first mindfulness-based stress reduction course more than 40 years ago. Bless his heart. He defined the word mindfulness as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, intentionally, in the present moment, not the past or future, but this moment, and doing this non-judgmentally. That last line is very important because many people begin to think, oh, I can't do this, I suck, I can't train my mind, I can't focus, etc. This is this whole cascade of judgmental thoughts that we have to be very careful with. So, this was an interesting, very simple review about what does mindfulness meditation. And to be clear, there are many different practices, probably even like 30 to 40 different kinds of mindfulness meditation practices. Only a few of them have been studied empirically by scientists. But some of the effects of doing mindfulness meditation land on increasing one's ability for attention control, the ability to focus attention, shift attention, and sustain it, emotion regulation, using many different kinds of skills to up or down regulate specific emotions at will. And then third, self-awareness, understanding how the different views of self arise, and all of this land on self-regulation. Another way to think about this, what does it mean to become a mature, skillful adult that doesn't harm others and ideally helps others? That relies on self-regulation. So this is a very simple model, but there's more and more research on trying to figure out what are the effects of different specific meditation practices. From a neuroscience perspective, this is one of the targets. So using functional magnetic resonance imaging that picks up blood flow, here is a task that we did on a whole bunch of people where we asked them to react to their own negative self-beliefs. And I just wanted to introduce to you what's thought of as the self-referential brain network. What you see in these red or orange circles are brain activation in regions that together make up a brain network that is related to thinking about myself. It's a very robust brain network. And what you see on the right side in the black circle is an area called the amygdala. And I'll show you something about that in a moment. The amygdala has 13 nuclei, but it's very important in detecting what's salient in my environment, activating emotions, positive or negative emotions, and directing lots of the other areas of the brain. In fact, the amygdala is highly interconnected to almost the entire cortex. So it's a very powerful driving force that drives a lot of our emotional life and drives lots of our attention and behaviors. So this is simply to show that negative self-beliefs, we react to them in a very reliable set of brain regions. Here, what I want to show you is the effects of a mindfulness-based stress reduction program. This was a standard 8-week brief introduction to about 7 or 8 different mindfulness meditation practices. And what we see is in the solid line, in the beginning, we ask people to react to their own negative self-beliefs. And this area of the right amygdala, you see that it becomes activated when you're spinning on my own negative self-beliefs. I'm insecure, I'm not cool enough, I'm anxious. And then a cue comes on to shift attention to the breath, to shift attention just to the sensations of the breath. And that redirects attention. And what you see is that amygdala activation tends to go down. Now in the dotted line, if you fast forward, the dotted line, this is after 2 months of mindfulness meditation training, brief introduction, same task. What you see is an increase initially of amygdala response, suggesting greater emotional engagement. This has been confirmed by other people in other labs. And I want to make sure that we understand the sociology of science is that you never trust a single study. Confirmation multiple times by many different research labs, not the same laboratory. So other people have also seen that this initial increase in emotional engagement followed quickly by a rapid drop back to baseline. This is the neural signature of psychological flexibility. This is the actual one way to actually infer and see in the brain itself emotional engagement and then release. So this is a hint of from the amygdala about some of the effects of mindfulness meditation specific to one's own negative self-beliefs. So now, let me invite us to, if you're standing, feel your feet on the ground. If you're seated, feel the weight of your body on the chair. If you're comfortable, you can have your eyes closed, and I will guide us in a very brief practice. If you wish, you can have your eyes open, but then bring your gaze down. Take a position of dignity. And what I mean by that is to feel at ease in the body, to relax the face, the neck, the shoulders. We can start by inviting our attention just inside the tip of the nostrils, and literally feel at your own pace the sensations as you breathe in and breathe out. What you might notice is the breath is cooler when we breathe in and warmer when we breathe out. As any thoughts, sounds, images appear in the mind, just note them and then release. And bring your attention back to feeling your own breath just inside the tip of the nostrils. Letting the mind rest on the awareness of the breath sensations. And for the next couple of breaths, I invite you to do the following. At the very end of the exhalation, there's a brief moment where there's a pause just before the next inhalation. Can we slow down just enough to notice the very end of the exhalation? And that brief moment before the next breath begins. Slowing down, noticing. And now, just briefly, I'd like us to figuratively open the mind, open the field of view, and for the next few moments, noticing anything that the mind becomes drawn to. The sensation in the body, the sound, the thought, an image. So no need to push away anything. Notice how, from moment to moment, the mind sees, is attracted to an object. Color, thought, sensation, sound. Just hovering, awareness, noticing. No pushing away and no holding on to. Allowing. Noticing. And now take a deep, deep breath. Open your eyes. And that was just a very brief play in noticing the breath, focused attention on a specific object, sensation, or that still moment, and then also opening to, sometimes called open monitoring or expansive attention, of anything that's moving through the stream of awareness. These are a couple of different kinds of attention training practices. There are many, many, many of these. And if you're curious, I really suggest playing with these, because there are many fascinating things to be observed. So I like cartoons. And what does mindfulness do? Well, one of the ways to conceptualize this is like the mind is this flagpole that's fluttering in the wind of thoughts, feelings, emotions, ideas. And mindfulness is like this solid pole, this aspect of the mind that's grounded to the earth, reliable, stable, while at the same time, the mind can be fluttering in thoughts, ideas, memories. And it's really helpful to have an image like this, so that in the midst of a difficult or challenging moment, you can rely on another aspect of the mind that is reliable, stable, grounded. Another aspect, or framework, I should say, in this contemplative developmental trajectory, it's helpful. Hopefully it's helpful. It's like this bird, this beautiful bird that has two wings and actually tail wings. And there are these three different features of us. And you can frame it as a question. To develop compassion, how much do I need to develop insight and wisdom into the nature of reality, of myself, others? And then skillful means having compassion, caring for others, and insight and wisdom. How do I express that in a way that is skillful, with methods that are effective and skillful? So there's kind of an interplay of these three different features, which in fact are interrelated. You can think about it as an athlete, you develop muscles, strength, muscle memory, but you also develop flexibility in your ligaments. So likewise, there are many different aspects that have to come together to become a fully developed human being, I would suggest. So now let's do another, with your consent, let's do another practice. So here I'm going to, just for a moment, stop sharing the screen so you can see. So what I'd like us to do, rolling up the sleeve of my left arm, and what I'd like us to do, this is a practice in awareness, in observation, and we'll debrief briefly afterwards. Take your two fingers, picking a spot on my foreskin, and you can keep your eyes open, but I'd like you to observe what's happening. Take two fingers, pick a spot, and now begin pinching the skin. Pinch the skin hard enough so that you begin to have sensation. I am having a sensation. And notice your mind. Notice the mind. The mind might be labeling this as unpleasant. The mind thoughts might be going, why the heck am I doing this to myself? Notice the sensations. And then keep your eyes and your mind focused on that particular spot as you let go, and notice what is happening. What do I observe? What's changing? So, for many of us, I see a change visually on my skin, but I also feel a throbbing that's ebbing and flowing and changing and dissipating over time. This is important because this is an insight into the impermanence, change, transitory nature of even something that is unpleasant or even pleasant for some people. Noticing that what I consider painful, horrible, actually is made up of many, many, many moments of change. It's this change, this little gap, that serves as a basis for developing insight into impermanence and change. So I just offer this as a little thing because many of us deal with pain, physical pain, and even emotional pain, and then we concretize it. But in fact, it's not concrete. It's ebbing and flowing. So I just wanted to share that tiny little piece. let me go back to this. There's much more to say about this, obviously. Next, what I'd like us to do is to look at a picture. Look at this photograph. Notice that there are 4 faces on the screen. What is your mind brain doing to make sense of this? One of the primary functions of the mind brain is to create narratives, stories. What's the story your mind is making right this moment to understand this photograph, these 4 people, these 4 faces? What is happening? What just happened? So empathy, empathic response, noticing others, creating a model of other people's feelings, emotions, their reality, is a fundamental skill that can be developed. Some people already have it really well developed, others don't. An empathic resonance with others. This is a fundamental building block for what we call compassion. If our idea of becoming a fully compassionate being means I have to be almost angelic, then honestly, I set the bar so high that I'm bound to fail. And I might really denigrate or put myself down. I'll never be angelic. I can never be a compassionate, caring person. That's setting the bar way too high. On the other hand, to be completely honest, we all have the neural architecture, the brain systems, the mental capacities to become caring and loving, but we also have the opposite, the dark side. So this is a young woman, United States soldier, who was born to parents who probably loved her and cared for her. She joined the military. Context, setting is incredibly influential. So this is in Iraq, Abu Ghraib prison, and she enters a setting where she can now treat other fellow human beings as if they were not human in a prison. So it's important to share this because we all have this. That to become a compassionate being also means to understand our own dark sides, and that we have to be incredibly skillful in joining contexts and settings that support compassion as opposed to evil, to treating other people as non-human. And even in the most intense contexts, like the tour of duty in war, in a battle, a soldier can drop in, can actually fully arrive and into a moment of caring for others. Pablo Casals, cellist, he said, I feel the capacity to care for others is the thing which gives life its deepest significance. So we also have this capacity, and if we had more times, I would show you research on many different kinds of compassion. It's not one thing. But compassion, there are many different definitions. And actually, what I'm going to do is just go to the next slide, because this is Thupten Jinpa, formerly a monk, an incredible scholar, one of the preeminent translators for the Dalai Lama. His name is the Dalai Lama. He came to Stanford and he shared with us these 4 different aspects of compassion, which come directly from text sources. That there's a cognitive aspect to compassion, which is an awareness of the suffering of others. There's an affective component, which is sympathetic concern related to being emotionally moved by the suffering that we see in others. And then intention, which is a wish to see the relief, the removal of that suffering in others. And then a motivation, part 4, which is a readiness, almost like a springboard, a readiness in our mind, brain, body, to help relieve that suffering in a skillful way, based on insight and wisdom and caring. So these are really important clues about the complexity of what compassion means. And it's actually even more complex than this. But note that it does not refer to a behavior, and it does not refer to an emotion, but it's almost like a cognitive stance. and a readiness of the system to see and then to take action. So with your consent, we're going to do another brief practice that I find very important. So again, I would like you to close your eyes, and I will guide you through this brief practice, self across time, and begin by finding your breath, either feeling the torso expanding and contracting as you breathe in and out, grounding your mind, your attention, letting the awareness of the breath stabilize, as you breathe in and out at your own pace. Here we're going to use one of the amazing human capacities of imagination, visualization. And we're going to look at ourselves across the lifespan. And what I will ask you to do is simply to notice what adjectives, words, appear in your mind freely when I ask you, how would you describe this version of yourself? There's no right or wrong answer. To simply notice what arises in your mind, what adjectives arise in your mind. So to begin with, this life, try to visualize yourself just moments after being born. A small infant. This is yourself. When you see this version of yourself, this small infant, newly born into this life, how would you describe her or his qualities? Notice what are the words that appear in the mind to describe the qualities of this small version of yourself. Moving forward in time, bring up an image of yourself when you're about 9 or 10 years old. A kid. And when you see that version of yourself when you're about 9 or 10 years old, how would you describe the qualities, the features of this version of yourself? Moving forward in time, bring up an image of yourself when you're about 25 years old, a young adult. Literally see yourself. What are the qualities of this person? How would you describe this person at about 25 years old? Moving forward to the present moment, the version of yourself as you are now. See an image of yourself in your mind. Who is this person? How would you describe this person? Then moving forward in time, say 10 years from now, what does that version of yourself look like? Who is that person? How would you describe that person? Then moving forward one last step, the end of this lifespan, perhaps the last week before the end of this life. An image of yourself. What are the qualities of this version of yourself at the end of the lifespan? And now, figuratively in your mind, if you lean back, can you open the field of view to expand it enough to hold all of these different versions of the self? Just notice what it feels like to see the full spectrum of selves across time. Not a fixed, singular self, but multiple versions of yourself across time. Now take 2 deep, deep breaths at your own pace, and then open your eyes. So what you should see in the screen in front of you is what's called the self-referential brain network. It consists of at least these 3 different nodes. As you can see, it's in the midline. And Nordhoff did fantastic work and continues to do so up to the present in doing meta-analyses of many, many, many different independent research studies, and found that this self-referential network is highly activated. In fact, you were just activating this network now when you were visualizing yourself, thinking about yourself, describing qualities about yourself. This is a fundamental network. It's not to say that the self exists there. That's not what we would say. But this is a network that's activated when you're paying attention, directing attention to yourself, thinking about yourself. Very important. And this is just an image to help kind of cement what we just did, which is that there are many versions of self that are continuously changing over time. Here, simply put, we have a self-concept. Is it malleable? Does it change over time? Is there a past self, a present self, many possible future selves? In lots of psychotherapy work, we focus on these self-schemas, this whole slew or set of views of self. Which ones are adaptive and helpful, beneficial? Which views of self are not accurate or are harmful? And this is kind of the inner work that leads to becoming a fully mature, balanced human being. There are many types of self-concept. And so I just wanted to put this, and I'm happy to share the slides, but I just wanted to put this up, that there's a lot of thinking about models of different versions of the self-concept. Okay, there's, thank you for that. Now I want to do another brief practice. I think that we still have time. I'm just checking because there's a bunch of things I'd like to do, but we'll see. Whoops, hang on a second. Yeah, I think we can do this. All right. In fact, what I wanted to do is make sure we have time for discussion. So what I'll do is I'm going to skip this practice, but go to here. There's a few other practices that I want to do. So Tanya Singer, one of the top neuroscientists on the planet, she's in Germany, Leipzig Institute. She and her research lab have done fantastic investigations into understanding what are the neural bases of understanding pain and suffering in others. And what you see here on the left are some areas of the brain. The ones that are in green, and there are other ones, really are part of the brain that work together to support our ability, and it's a really interesting ability, to shift our perspective. I wonder what it's like for this person in front of me. I wonder how this person is feeling and thinking. And this is called social cognition. So this ability to create a model of how others are feeling in their body, in their mind, in their emotions. The parts in red, anterior insula, somatosensory cortex, anterior cingulate, she's found that these are areas that load on what's called empathy. So the ability to have a felt sense, not just a cognitive perspective, but a felt sense, perhaps even in my own body, of what it's like for you when you are feeling pain or loneliness or disgust or sadness. So this is an empathic resonance, model-making part network in the brain. This is one of my favorite slides. It comes from Science, almost 50-something years ago, published in Science, one of the top journals, and it's imitation in infants. So the essence is that we, born as infants, even within the first couple of months, have enough neural architecture, brain architecture in place to be able to notice and see our caregivers, to see their facial expressions, to see behaviors that they're doing with their mouth, their eyes, their lips, and then, importantly, to mimic or imitate those back to the caregiver. This induces oxytocin rushes in the caregiver, be it a father or a mother. And this, I would suggest, is the beginning of the social glue, the social bonding, the intimate attachment with the people around us who are caring for us. So I find this to be incredibly fascinating from an evolutionary perspective, that we have just enough brain matter to be able to engage in this kind of interpersonal communication. As many of you probably have already heard, there's this frontoparietal mirror neuron system in our brains that was first discovered across species and then within species. But in essence, there's a back of the brain areas that perceive others, what they're doing, their behaviors, creates a model of it, and then moves forward in the brain to enact and mimic, mirror that. This kind of imitation, this is from a neuroscientist at UC, University of California, Los Angeles, Marco Iccoboni. He said, quote, "Through imitation and mimicry, mimicking, we are able to feel what other people feel. By being able to feel what other people feel, we are also able to respond compassionately to other people's emotional states." We could stop right here. That is the practice. That is one essential practice, to understand what other people are feeling, to respond compassionately. So I'm going to skip this one. This is a practice I like very much, just like me, just in the spirit of time, because I want to hear from all of you. I want to cover a little bit more data. So it's compassion training. Currently, there are many different kinds of compassion training programs that are out there. Some of them are interpersonal focused, it's like mindful self-compassion, compassion-focused therapy. Some of the interpersonal ones are compassion-based cognitive therapy, mindfulness-based compassionate living, meditation awareness training, MAT, and then one that with Thupten Jimba and others at Stanford, we developed called Compassion Cultivation Training, or CCT, 2-month-long program. There's here on the right, you see the core group that put it together. I was included in that. And in essence, on the left, you'll see stabilizing the mind, developing different aspects of compassion, a sense of shared humanity, and then an active or engaged compassion, and then integrating all of that. So it started out as a 9-week program, reduced to 8 weeks, and it's being trained and offered many places. And here's some results from an initial randomized controlled trial of this 9-week compassion training. 100 people, community adults, in a waitlist control group. They're all roughly about 30 to 50 years old, majority females. The instructors here had a lot of experience with personal meditation and also were in meditation teaching, and also happened to all be PhDs in psychology. So that's the basis. 3 different kinds of compassion, at least, that can be measured with self-report. So there's number 1, compassion for other people, person A to person B, Sharon to Philippe. There's also 2, being the recipient or receiving compassion from others, which may or may not be comfortable. And then 3, compassion from myself to myself, self-compassion. So I just wanted to make sure that people are aware that there are at least these 3 different aspects of compassion, and I would suggest there's even a lot more. And what we found is on from pre to post 9 weeks of compassion, we've actually found significant increases in self-reported compassion for others, compassion for self, feeling compassion as receiving compassion from others, and self-compassion scale. So a significant increase. So this is just to show that it should increase these different aspects of compassion, and it does. But more importantly here, please pay attention, which is that the X, or the horizontal, is weekly formal meditation practice measured in minutes over the 9 weeks. And what you see on the Y-axis as you go up is in percent improvement or increase in compassion for others. So what we see is what's called a dose effect. The more minutes that people dedicate to doing formal compassion practice, it increases, it's related to an increase in association, correlation of compassion towards others. But going even more detailed, we did what's called daily experience sampling, which is that we did 2 assessments per day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, for 11 weeks, baseline, 9 weeks of practice, 1 week after. We've got a lot of data, lots of different questions, but I'm going to give you just a little taste. So in here, what we see is over from BL, baseline, to post, that's 9-10 weeks later. What we see in the blue line was there was a significant increase over time in feeling calm. In the orange line at the bottom, you see there is a significant decrease in feeling anxious. So those are some good effects, and you can see that they change over time, so a trajectory. But then specifically, here's one question we asked: have you done anything kind or caring today for yourself or for another person? Just yes, no. This is part of the daily experience sampling. What we see is that caring behaviors fluctuate, but they seem to increase a little bit over time. Caring behaviors towards the self over this 9 weeks. Caring behaviors towards others increased, not linearly, non-linearly, actually, over time. Then there's another important question, which is, have you completed a formal meditation practice today? Yes or no? And so what you see here is that on the left in blue, as a function of whether I said, yes, I did meditate today, and then on the same day, the probability that I engaged in caring behavior for myself. And as you can see, self-caring behavior is 6.5 times more likely to occur if I said, yes, I meditated today. On the right side, you see other caring behaviors also increased, about 3.5 times more likely if I'd said yes. So this is nitty-gritty, day-to-day, the effect of having practiced meditation practice on caring behaviors. So this is kind of the detailed level that we really want us to get at. Then we did what's called a mediator analysis, which is, does daily anxiety mediate, influence the effect of meditation on caring behaviors? And the answer to that was empirically yes. Meditation practice, anxiety goes down. As anxiety goes down, caring behavior for self and for others goes up. This is one pathway, not necessarily the only one, but one that we could identify for the effect of meditation on anxiety and then caring behaviors. Were you thinking about something other than what you're currently doing? Meaning, were you off task? Was my mind wandering? Yes or no? And then if yes, to pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant thoughts. Punchline: x-axis, number of hours of compassion meditation practice over 9 weeks. On the y-axis, vertical, is the probability of mind wandering at the end of training. And what we see is that there was with more meditation practice, there was an increase in mind wandering to pleasant content. For neutral, the dotted line, no change. And for unpleasant thoughts, it decreased. So again, don't trust this one study. Replication, replication, replication. But it's a hint. Just quickly, anticipatory anxiety went down over 9 weeks and even 3 months follow-up. Anticipatory anxiety in this large sample of 92 adults. Anxiety during social interactions with others
decreased over 2 months of practice plus 3 months follow-up. Stress disrupting my ability in daily functioning. That decreased over time. Suppressing showing my emotions, sharing what I'm feeling with others. That decreased over time. That's a good thing. And so there are many different effects. But what I'd like to do now is just end with one final practice, and then we're going to shift to Q&A. So I can stop sharing the screen. Well, let's just do this one. So again, just briefly, close your eyes. And in this case, put your right palm over your chest, over your heart. Take the left palm and put it over your belly, gently. And then as always, we can begin by settling the mind, feeling the body, the torso, breathing, expanding and contracting as I breathe in and breathe out. Literally feel the torso breathing. You might even begin to feel your heartbeat, the sensation of the muscles in the heart contracting, pushing blood throughout the entire body. And then thinking of people who you unconditionally love and feel safe with and care for. Might be friends, pets, family members. Just bring them to mind. And note that right this moment, those loved ones, their hearts are beating, their lungs are breathing, just like me. Wishing to be well, to be happy, to be safe, just like me. Expanding the field of view, wherever you are, can you expand it to include all the people who live in the town or the city where you are right now? Thousands of people, just like me, right this moment, breathing, hearts beating. Wishing to be loved, appreciated, cared for, just like me. If we expand the field of view to include all of Asia, billions of human beings, right this moment, breathing, lungs breathing, hearts beating, just like me. Wishing to live a meaningful life, to have work, to care for others, to be well, just like me. If we expand the field of view a little wider, think of the entire planet, Earth. Almost 8 billion human beings. Right this moment. Lungs breathing, hearts beating, just like me. Wishing to be free from pain, suffering, war, just like me, breathing, right this moment. And if we expand the field of view a little further, in addition to human animals, 8 billion human animals, us, there are countless non-human animals on the planet together, living with right now. Hearts beating, lungs breathing, wishing to be safe, healthy, free, just like me, right this moment. Sitting in the awareness of all these living beings, simultaneously sharing the same planet, breathing, hearts beating, just like me. Holding an awareness of all vibrant life. Then take 2 or 3 deep, deep breaths at your own pace, and then open your eyes. And I will finish with just 2 quotes. One is from the Dalai Lama that says that love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive. I would strongly support that. And then from one of my heroes and my father's heroes, Einstein, this quote says, "A human being is part of a whole, called by us the universe, a part that is limited in time and space. But that person experiences herself, himself, thoughts, feelings as something separated from the rest. This is a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison, this optical delusion, by widening our circles of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty." So that's Albert Einstein. And I simply say, thank you for all of you for paying attention. And now